Morning, Eddie. Can we firstly get your reaction, please, to Joelinton signing a new contract?
Yeah, amazing news for all of us. I think such an important player. And yeah, it wasn't straightforward, but great that he sees his future here. And I think it's a big bit of news for us, a big boost.
You said it wasn't straightforward. You'd been negotiating with him and his people for a while. Why do you think it took the length of time that it did to finally get it signed?
Well, it's a big contract for him. I think he's at an age where it's a pivotal moment in his career, really. And I'll make this clear, really, he's never doubted his love for Newcastle or his want to stay. But of course, everything has to be right. And it's a complex process when you have representatives involved. And yeah, so it's never straightforward. But all through the process, he's been excellent in his conduct, and the messages to me has always been that he wants to stay, and we're very grateful for everyone involved that we're able to get there.
Such an important player for you, and has been during your time here. I imagine he's someone that's popular with his teammates as well because of the way that he plays and also his personality.
Yeah, you're spot on. He is very, very popular internally. He obviously has a close relationship with Bruno. I think that's well documented. I think you can see that on the pitch. But not only Bruno, I think everyone looks at Joe as a winner with how he trains. He has that mentality that he's not here to waste time. He's here to achieve, and he's very ambitious. And you want players like that in your changing room. So yeah, he is universally popular, and of course he has a brilliant bond with the supporters as well. And I think that hopefully is a big lift for everyone.
How much have you missed him over the last 3 months?
Undoubtedly, yeah, on the pitch. I think he's got that presence as well. He's a big guy, not only in personality but in stature, and I think we've missed his dual-willing ability, his coverage in midfield, and versatility as well. Can't be underestimated. When you have injuries like we have, to have players that can play dual roles is hugely important, and we need him back as quickly as possible.
Is there a chance that you could see him again this season?
Yeah, I think Joe would tell you yes, but we need to make sure that he is ready to play. We can't rush the process. He has to be feeling good, and we have to minimise risk.
Moving on, Joe Willock was substituted at Fulham last weekend. Can you tell us sort of how he's doing with his fitness and whether he'll be in the squad for Spurs?
Yes, I can. So Joe's been to see another specialist to check on the progress of his Achilles, which has been problematic for him. I think it's been a difficult injury because it's not been straightforward. He's had a few complications through the process of him returning back to full fitness. The feedback was positive generally in the respect that the Achilles is healing and it's doing well. But it will fluctuate from time to time. He will have moments where it's not feeling so good. For Tottenham, I'm not sure. I probably think he won't be available for us. There's a chance that he will be available then throughout the rest of the season, but again, that's slightly unclear. We need to make sure the long-term prognosis for him is positive, and that might mean a short period of rest.
Given what you're looking to achieve in the remainder of the season, and also how you managed to get the result at Fulham, how significant do you feel last weekend was?
Yeah, it was a big result. I mean, I spoke at length after the game. It wasn't a great performance from us, especially early in the game, but we were dogged, we were determined. We rode an initial period in the game where we were unhappy with how we played, but we haven't done that enough away from home this season. Usually when we're below par, we've found a way to concede, and it's been difficult for us on the road. But I thought it was a big step forward in not playing well, but it was quite reminiscent of last year, where there was lots of games where we weren't quite in our best rhythm, but we were solid, we didn't concede, and then we'd find a way to score and win the game. And it was a welcome return in that vein of form.
And just a couple on Spurs. Last season was incredible, the home match. I don't imagine we'll ever see anything like that again, will we? Just given how the way that you did it in that early period.
Well, hopefully we will. But I think that was a special game for us because everything clicked. We were devastating in attack. We were ruthless with the chances we took, and it was one of those days that you get, as you say, rarely in football, but everything went our way, and it was a memorable game and a memorable opening part of the match. I think this is a totally different Tottenham team now. I think they've played very well this year. Watched them a lot. I admire them tactically. I admire them physically. I think they've done very well, and I think Ange deserves big credit for how his philosophy has been implemented in the speed that it has, and just generally how they've played.
Thank you.
Eddie, Joelinton was a striker before you arrived, and I think he was struggling for confidence and had been for some time. Can you remember the moment where you thought he's got the tools here to become a box-to-box midfielder?
Well, I always go back to my first training session with him, where I genuinely thought after the training session what a player he is. And it led to me very quickly to being confused as to why his time here hadn't been a success, because I saw a player that was immensely talented. But obviously I was aware coming in that it hadn't gone well. In terms of the position, I'm not going to change history. I'm not going to try and be clever and say that I saw his transition to a midfielder initially. That we stumbled upon, and since then he's taken that opportunity to play in that position, and he's taken that opportunity to play in that position superbly well. And he's looked like a natural midfielder really from the minute he stepped into that position. I know at previous clubs he'd played in a deeper role, but more as a number 10. This is a big change because the defensive aspect of being a midfielder is totally different from being a number 10 to a number 8. But his defensive qualities have been as good as his attacking qualities, and that's why he's the all-round midfielder that he is now. And the player deserves huge credit for that transition. It's not easy to do, but he's done it brilliantly.
When you see the photographs of him when he signed back in 2019, he's half the size of what he is now. He's put a lot into it himself, like in terms of the physical stature, isn't he? He's huge now compared to what he was before, and you can tell he puts a lot into it off the pitch in terms of getting himself in the peak condition. Yeah,
he does. I mean, I think that transition probably comes about from playing in England as well. Just the speed and the strength of the game here. You have to adapt to it when you come from abroad. And Joe does pride himself on being the athlete that he is. He's robust. He's everything that you want him to be. That you see. And when I come up against him in training, not that I'm playing in training, but we'll be doing certain things, and he's like a brick wall. You can't move him. He's absolutely solid, and in part that's made him the player that he is, because, as I say, the physical side of the game is probably his biggest strength.
And it's quite rare you see that these days, isn't it? A player being with a club for such a long period of time. That's 5 years already. This could take him up into his early 30s. So you could have the best part of 10 years at one football club.
It is rare these days because, as you say, it's probably a thing that was for past generations, staying at a club for a really long period of time. But I hope Joe does, as long as he continues to perform in the way that he has in my time here. I think the signing of a contract obviously gives an insight into the next couple of years in Joe's career, and we hope it's a really successful time for him.
You touched on a moment ago the 6-1 against Spurs, 5-0 up inside 21 minutes. Have you managed to bottle that feeling? Have you felt that day?
I've had that rarely in my career, where everything just seems to fall your way, and every chance you create, you score. I think it can just be something just coming together. At that time, I think we were confident. There was a really good rhythm about the team, and as I say, our finishing that day was lethal. Of course, you're working towards days like that again, and you're always trying to find that connection between the players that makes a performance like that. But as I always say in the Premier League, we'll just take any win, no matter how it comes.
You're wearing a one-off shirt tomorrow for the game, with the proceeds of the sponsorship going to charity to allow supporters in the stadium who have difficulties with hearing the ability to experience St James's Park for themselves. How much are you looking forward to that, and what an opportunity it is for these supporters?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible thing. I mean, hearing about it this week, the gesture from Seller, I think it's a brilliant thing from them. Proud sponsors of the club, but an opportunity to showcase an unbelievable charity and to give the people of that charity an experience they'll never forget, I'm sure. I think it shows just the power of the football club, how we're trying to be inclusive to everybody, and I think it should be a great day.
Just finally from me, I know there's there's plans for next season for the offside situation to change for the automated offside, so you get a quicker decision, less sort of delay in the game. How do you feel about that? I guess that's a positive. Yeah.
I think it's a positive. I think when I've seen it work in previous competitions, I've liked it. I think it is a bit clearer for everybody. So I'm all for that. Anything that improves the speed and hopefully the quality of the decisions.
Andy? Come on, Eddie. Just on Joelinton, long-term contract. You mentioned how ambitious he is as a player, as a person. What sort of career can he go on to have for Newcastle United, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can go on become one of the biggest icons that the club's had. I think his relationship with the supporters is quite unique because he's gone from difficult moments to iconic status, and I'd love to see that continue and grow. I think for Joe also, he's got international ambitions, and just breaking into the Brazilian squad was a big moment for him, scoring his first goal, and I'm sure he'll have international ambitions as well. But I think first and foremost for Newcastle, I think he has to firstly get fit, win his place back, and then continue to showcase his talents.
Just on Joe Willock, obviously it's another setback and a really frustrating season for him. Have you spoken to him much, and how is he doing in himself? Because I imagine frustration's the key word for him at the minute.
Yeah, I've really felt for Joe this year. Since that hamstring injury against Brighton at the back end of last year, it's been very stop-start for him. It's been incredibly difficult for him to get a rhythm in his game where he feels really good within himself, and that's the competition so high that if you're not feeling 100%, the game can be very difficult. So yeah, I've had lots of conversations with him, lots of meetings to try and support him and to try and show him how much we all care about him and how determined we are to try and get him back to his very best physically. It does look like things are improving. It's positive news this week, but it may impact short-term his ability to play.
Joe aside, how else is the squad looking ahead of tomorrow? Can we expect anyone else back or not?
The closest player to coming back would be Tino Livramento, who's not joined in training yet, but has been more visible on the grass. So he's the closest. We've had Lewis Hall's not trained at all this week, so he's been a slight concern from the previous game. Other players are sort of in the background and beginning to improve quite quickly. So I'm hopeful that in the not too distant future we could get 3 or 4 players back.
Despite all the injuries, I guess in your sort of situation it would be easy to attach responsibility to that, to blame the injuries. You never have done once this season. Why is that when it would be so easy to do so, do you think?
Because I think you lose control. You lose control of your destiny. I think if you're always looking for external factors and reasons why you're not performing at your best, I think that ownership then leaves you and it goes to that area. So I always believe no matter how difficult the conditions and the circumstances, you can still win games and you can still ask your players to perform, the ones you have fit and available, to their very best levels. And yeah, I've always been a firm believer of that. I don't want to give our power away to anywhere or any direction. It's still in our hands, and I back the players we have that are fit to play well.
You talk about Ange Postecoglou there and bringing, his style to Tottenham Hotspur and being able to bring it so quickly, I suppose, in his first season. What do you think it is about him that's allowed him to do that?
That's difficult to know. I don't know him well. I only know him from probably as well as you do, in the sense of watching the media. I like the way he speaks. I like the way he talks. He's very frank and honest, very clear with what he says. But I can only judge his football team, and watching his teams play, it's been clear to me what they've tried to do and how they've implemented their style, coming from Celtic, which had a clear visible style there as well, but he's implemented it very quickly, and that's down to the quality of the coaching.
And just finally, it's a big weekend, I suppose, for Newcastle United as a club. Obviously, men play at Tottenham Hotspur tomorrow, but then the women could clinch back-to-back promotions on Sunday. What are your thoughts on that potential achievement, and have you managed to have a chat with Becky Langley about it?
Me and Becky are in regular communication, I have to say, but a lot of respect and admiration for her and the job that she's done with the team has been incredible. I mean, back-to-back promotions for anybody is incredibly difficult, and I like the way she conducts herself, the way she speaks, very passionate about the game, knowledgeable about the game. She's been in to see us a few times, so we really want to build that relationship, and good luck to her and all the girls in the next game.
Thanks, Eddie.
Eddie, morning. Just sticking to that theme, I mean, obviously another promotion means that of even higher profile for women's football in this area.
Yeah, so good for everyone connected with the club, because I think for the young girls here aspiring to be potential footballers in the future, the more high profile the game can be here, the more opportunities they may well get to play and to improve. And of course throughout the club we're trying to improve the facilities for everybody, and I think that's probably the next step for the club, and a lot of growth in that respect, that we can hopefully improve the environment for them, and the club can continue to grow in that way.
And the close association with the men's team and the club as a whole, obviously that sort of makes it feel like there's one football family, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's what Newcastle should be. We are one club, we are one family. We're trying to embrace every person at the football club, trying to create an environment that's healthy, happy for everyone to enjoy, and hopefully we can get all our players playing to the best of their abilities.
Listening to Joelinton's broadcast interview, he talked about how happy his kids were and they wanted to stay here forever, although I think he did hint at some point he'd like to go back to Brazil. But the pastoral care side of it, if you've got players, particularly overseas players, coming to a club, and obviously he did have a difficult start, how important is it to try and see if there are any aspects of life away from the training pitch that the club can help with?
Well, we take that part of our jobs very seriously. I do think if you have a happy footballer, they've got much better chance of performing at the best of their abilities, and there's a lot of things in place at the club to try and create that environment where they are happy, whether that's schools, good schools for their children, whether that's a good social life for the wives and girlfriends. All these things matter, and Joey's built a really good life for himself here. He does have very good friendships. It's great to see that his family are happy, and that's such an important part of the job that maybe a lot of people don't see, but it's vitally important.
He has so much pressure on him, when he first came, that £40 million price tag, and being played as a striker and not scoring goals in such a famous position on the pitch for this particular football club. So in many ways, less resilient people might have just looked away, turned away, and left the club and tried their luck somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's Joey's. When you analyse his success here, that's been his biggest moment, really. That he was mentally resilient enough to handle what was happening early in his time here, and he never shied away. And I think that's a brilliant quality to have. He was coming in every day, fronting up, and then delivering his best. And that's why I'm so pleased to see him get the success and the praise that he gets now, because it hasn't always been that way. It's been very different for him, but he was resilient enough to weather that period, and now he's reaping the rewards for that.
Thanks, Mark. Damien, any first kind of check on Lewis Hall's injury, please? What it is?
Tightness in his quad. Yeah, so no muscle pull directly, but enough to, as I say, see him miss training this week, and yeah, so he's a doubt for the game.
And just on Joelinton, you spoke about his strength of character there, but what kind of character is he away from the pitch? I would imagine very different to what you see on the pitch.
He's very different to what he is on the pitch. I think he's bright, bubbly, always smiling. I think he's an absolute gentleman for the size and stature that he is, and how aggressive he is on the pitch. He is a soft, sort of gentle giant off it. Great guy, and I say that's why he's so popular in the change room. I've never heard a bad word internally about Joey and his conduct and his behaviour. No, we all love him here.
And what kind of message can it send to both the players already here and the ones you hope to bring here when somebody like Joelinton commits his long-term future to the project?
Well, it certainly helps, and I think it helps with the perception of our ambition, and that we're still desperate to grow and improve. For me to do that, you have to try and keep your best players. You have to try and create something that everyone wants to be part of. So I think that's why we're not looking at future signings on this contract. This is about trying to retain your best players and give yourselves the best chance to be successful long term.
We've got Ian, Luke, and then Chris. Ian.
Good to see you again.
Too.
When you look back on the Spurs game last year, I mean, as a manager, you always say quite right, you never switch off. But on 21 minutes, when it's 5-0, are you a bit like a fan? Did you just sit back and enjoy the football feast, or was it a different mindset than anything you've ever experienced before?
Let me tell you, not for a second. It's not when you've got Harry Kane on the other team, who then scores, and you're looking and going, how long left? But that's the reality. I think when you're managing, you're sort of looking at things in a totally different way. To supporters, you can't be in that world. You have to always be thinking what if and anticipating things that can go wrong. Of course, I was enjoying the football that we played that day, and I was enjoying the early stages of the game like everybody else. But I don't think you can ever switch off and take yourself to that place of total enjoyment.
It's a case of thank God Harry Kane's not playing tomorrow.
Well, they haven't. Harry Kane's an unbelievable centre forward, probably the best in the world, arguably. But they haven't seemed to overly miss him this year because they've obviously changed their philosophy, changed their style of play, and now they've got goals from different sources rather than the one main source. So I still think they're a very, very effective team.
And it goes without saying, if you win 1-0, that'd be a great result, and you'd probably settle for that.
As I say, you take any win. I don't really. The scoreline's important, of course it is. We want to be solid defensively. We want to be good in attack. But any win in the Premier League is a great thing.
Luke.
Hi. The Joelinton sign, does that allow you to firm up your sort of transfer plans now in terms of keeping one of your key players? Because obviously you'd said if you did sign a new contract going into the final year, you would be vulnerable to being sold.
Well, I think it certainly allows us to plan with him as part of the squad, and I think that's hugely important because he's versatile. As I said earlier, he can play different positions, so that takes a bit of the stress away in that position and potentially other positions. Like I said last week, it's still going to be a slightly difficult summer to plan for. A lot of unknowns in the transfer market in January, a lot of unknowns still carrying forward, I think, to this summer window. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So we'll have our plans. We're preparing now for the window, and let's wait and see what happens.
I know you always say and sort of scoff at the idea a little bit that players are always playing. They're always playing for their future. That's always your attitude. But are you particularly focused now because there are decisions that need to be made in the summer on players' futures?
Yeah, I think you've already answered the question. Because you're always looking at the future, you're always analysing players on a daily basis to see whether they have the qualities, the attitude, they still want to be part of what you're building, and that takes, as I say, that's a daily basis thing, and you're always planning in my head for the future and trying to make the best decisions you can for Newcastle.
Right, time for a more difficult one for you now. No,
you don't have to.
I'm joking. With the reaction of when you went into the international break with the Manchester City game, there was a lot of talk externally. I know you denied it all, that the season was over effectively. How pleased are you with the reaction of your team, staff and everybody with the run you've put together since then?
Yeah, it's been a big 3 games for us, and I think we knew that coming out of the international break or going into it, that off the back of the Manchester City game that would have been perceived negatively, and a lot of people would have probably put a line through us and go, that's Newcastle season done. We certainly didn't. We had high hopes for us coming back in with 10 games to go, that we could still have a part to play in the places for Europe. And we've made a good start to that, that's all it is. Got 7 games to go, they will go very quickly. Games like Tottenham will go a long way to deciding where we finish.
Chris?
Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
In January, when Joelinton first was injured, it sort of almost altered your potential transfer plans for that month because of what you'd have been missing. I mean, going into this summer, if you had lost him, when you were sort of looking at potential options to bring in, is he almost unique in terms of what he offers? When you were looking for other midfielders or other versatile players like him, how difficult is it to find someone like Joelinton?
Yeah, I think I say this about a lot of the players we have. They're not easy to find replacements for. I think, and Joe would be one of those. He's 6'3", plays different positions. He's strong. He's quick. He scores goals. He's competitive. He's got a great attitude. Those players aren't around to recruit easily. So that's why we've got to treasure the ones we have, the good ones we have, and do everything we can to keep them happy, and so they want to play for Newcastle continually. Because replacing them, it sounds easy, but it's absolutely not. So as I say, we have to treasure the ones we have.
And just on Dan Burn, obviously the last couple of games he's moved back into left-sided centre-back, and he seems to have performed really well there. You said a few weeks ago that he's trained almost exclusively as a left-back up until the point where he shifted in there. How impressed have you been by that transition?
Yeah, very good for Dan. I think he's been excellent. I think he looks better physically. You know, he broke his back. It was a really serious injury. He came back quite quickly from that injury due to the position we were in as a squad. So again, another player that's really done everything he can for the team. And then moving back in centrally, it's looked comfortable for him. I think it's obviously an easier position to play physically than the roles on the outside of the pitch. But I think his leadership qualities again have been first class. He's played really well with Fabian. They've built a good relationship up again very quickly. So that's been good to see.
Can we just quickly, you mentioned the sort of leadership qualities. I suppose you haven't had both your squad captain and your on-field captain over the course of the last few weeks. So as Dan, one of the players who really stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a big part of our leadership team for a long time. But out of that leadership group, I think he's the only one that's fit, which is a problem for us, because when you lose the voices and the positive influences that those players are, it certainly leaves a bit of a gap. So then you need other players to step up, and I think we do have other leaders that are emerging. But Dan's been one consistent for us, and I think he's been huge for us in lots of different respects. He's an absolute role model really for everyone to look at, and he does lead by example every single day.
Okay, Kieran, Louise and then Jason. Kieran.
Hi, the club got the contract on without a sporting director in place. Would you still like one in the summer, given how stressful it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally, the club this size has to have, in my opinion, that role filled. And I think the club will do everything it can to find the right person to do that. But in the meantime, I think we have people in place that are filling that void and doing a very good job, I have to say. I think we've carried on quite well with Dan's exit, and I think the club's functioning well at the moment.
This is the first time you come up against James Maddison since he moved to Spurs. Was he ever close to coming here?
No, I don't think he was ever close in the literal sense of coming here, but he's a player that I've admired for many, many years. I think he's outstanding. I mean, I watched him play for Coventry many, many years ago, going way back, and liked him straight away. So no, he's never come close to signing for me, but regardless of that, he's a player that I think is an outstanding talent, and this year I think he's really excelled when he's been fit. He's really excelled in Ange's style, and he's certainly a player we're going to have to keep quiet tomorrow.
Okay. Louise?
Hi Eddie. I mean, it was a real watershed moment when Joelinton, Kieran Clark was sent off in that game against Norwich, and Joelinton moved back into midfield and sort of started showing off his inner Patrick Vieira. Has that ever happened to you in your career before with a player, by accident, as you say, stumbled into it? And do you think, in a wider context in football, there are some players that are playing in the wrong position, or if not the wrong position, perhaps not their best position?
I probably can't think of a case as clear as Joe in that respect, but I have moved lots of players in my time. So I've signed players playing in one position and then played them in a different position. Just due to how I see the game being slightly different to maybe how someone else sees the game. And I think there's been several examples of this throughout, where you can move a player position and suddenly they can just see other qualities in their game that you weren't seeing before. So I think it's important. Speak of my upbringing, I was a right back for a long time in my youth career, and then suddenly I was viewed too small to be a centre half, and probably you're looking at me going, yeah, you're way too small to be a centre half. But actually, when I moved there, I suddenly felt at home in that position, and my career changed direction totally. So I've seen the power of that myself, and that's why I would never rule out looking at players in different positions, because I think it's a huge thing.
I mean, after that game, did you immediately say to Joelinton, you're a midfielder, and how did he react? Did he say, this is where I want to play, or...?
I can't remember, really. I think he enjoyed the game. I think he enjoyed playing in that position, and I think that's another key thing, because you can have an idea of moving a player's position, but if the player's not on board with it, if he's not comfortable in that position, then it won't work. So Joe embraced it fully. He wanted to do it, and I think he saw the benefits of it. And I think when you get that, then of course it works for everybody.
Thanks, Louise. Jason?
There's been some nice tributes to one of your predecessors, Joe Kinnear, this week, following his sad passing, not least from our colleague Simon here, following their infamous spat in this very room. I don't know if you'd heard about that way back in the day, about when they fell out with some rather colourful language. I just wondered what's the worst thing you ever called anyone in a press conference?
You're about to find out.
Well, I think you'll know me well enough by now. I try to stay away from that confrontation in this room. I'll have plenty of confrontation in other rooms, but in this room, I don't think it's my nature to do that. But I think Joe was a colourful character, and I think he an unbelievable football man, and I think he brought colour and life to the game. So I think any former manager of Newcastle deserves huge sort of credit and kudos for doing what is an incredibly difficult job. So yeah, definitely thinking of him and his family at this difficult time.
A lot of the press conferences that Premier League managers do these days, they're quite kind of stage managed and what have you, but they're still quite important ways of supporters getting snippets of information about their club. I mean, obviously you're compelled to do them, I think, under Premier League rules, but if you weren't, would you do them? Or?
Absolutely not. No, of course I would. I mean, it's great fun. That was sarcasm. No, I think it's important, definitely, for the supporters to hear from me on all the different things that are going on at the football club that I can talk about. I think that's a vital part of the job, because you need to keep everyone as far as you can updated in all the different things that happen day to day. It is an obligation, I think, but it's a vital part of the job to be able to discuss the team and the club, and there's so much interest around the world. Everyone wants to know what's going on, so I think it's absolutely right that we do it.
You see it as a way of getting things out there, or trying to keep things in-house, though? Sometimes it's a bit of balance of both, is it?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, because of course there's things that happen day to day that you don't want to get out, like team selection and injury news and all those things that you want to hear. Yeah, that we don't want to let out, and of course, because you're looking for a competitive advantage against the team you're playing. But there's absolutely things at times where I feel I have to get out, and for the benefit of everybody, that everyone needs to know what's going on.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. Scott, Joe and Jordan's finish.
You've said a number of times today, Eddie, about the importance of keeping your big players, and the Joelinton contract's obviously evidence of that. But there was a point last summer where you were very open with us in saying, if someone doesn't leave, I can't do what I need to do, and that's when Alan went kind of through the door. I mean, have you had conversations yet about what this summer would look like if no big players leave? Because clearly that's not ideal, and can you do what you want to do if no one leaves?
A lot of questions in there.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, I think with financial fair play now, I think there'll be decisions made by every club that they don't necessarily want to make. There'll be players and transfers done that sort of from the manager's perspective, maybe in former times that wouldn't have happened. Yeah. So it's difficult for me to give absolute clarity on what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. I don't know. But financial fair play is still and will be this summer something that we have to be aware of.
And so while you say that a deal like the Joelinton deal is something that you definitely want to do, and you almost kind of do it as an isolated thing, does it still have to be part of that wider jigsaw? Because clearly you know, a long-term deal for a key player on, you know, presumably pretty decent money will have ramifications for what you can do elsewhere.
Yeah, of course it will have ramifications because you're potentially, as you say, lifting wages, etc., and that has an impact on your financial fair play sheet. But the alternative is that Joe leaves with a free transfer, which for a player of his quality, I think would be really bad business from us. So I think that has alleviated that problem. But of course, it maybe gives you problems elsewhere that you need to fix.
Joe?
Hi, with all the injury problems we've got in midfield, is there someone like Elliot Anderson's time to shine, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's becoming his time to shine. Yeah, I think he's grasped his opportunity in the last 2 games. Well, I think he's done really, really well. I think when you look back at the Everton game, I thought he was excellent. Sorry, 3 games, because West Ham, he had a big impact when he came on the pitch. And last week against Fulham again, I thought he was one of the reasons why we were able to win that game, along with Harvey, who made a big impact as well. So really pleased with those players coming into the team. Undoubted quality, both of them. Are very different, but they've both got big parts to play.
And one more player who's injured, Lewis Miley. Is there any updates on his injury?
Yeah, we're taking it very, very cautiously with Louis being so young. So yeah, there's no imminent return date for him.
Jordan's finished.
Just another one, she's Kieran Trippier. How's he doing?
He's doing well. He'd be one of the players in the background that's starting to feel really good. He's still not on the training pitch with us, but positive signs, positive outlook for him, and hopefully he'll be back soon.
You mentioned a few weeks ago about Matt Talbot's injury. Is he any closer to return?
No, Matt's not, no. So that one's turned out to be a bit more serious than we maybe initially thought. It's an Achilles problem, so let's wait and see on that.